How's it going, everybody? It's Jeff Chrysler here, a detail enthusiast, and I'm here with a little bit different of a video. I'm going to show you what I've been working on with my scale modeling. I've been building a 1/32 scale Lancaster. What you're looking at right now on the wall there is also a 1/32 scale Lancaster. This is the HK models Lancaster that I built a few years ago. I covered it in my blog with photos and whatnot. I built this model using the Magic Scale Models electronics kit. So it has all four engines come to life with little motors inside that spin the propellers, and there's speakers in the wings and a little circuit board. The fuselage has full lighting. There's wingtip lighting. So you can turn it on and the whole thing comes to life with about a 5-minute sequence of all four engines starting individually with sound, and all the lights in the interior coming on individually with a sequence. Yeah, it's a pretty impressive thing. So I'll show you that in these next few shots. And then we'll come back to my current build, which is this beautiful Border Models Lancaster. For those who know, Border Models took over Wingnut Wings, who were putting together the molds for this kit. And Peter Jackson's company, Wingnut Wings, they unfortunately went bankrupt before the release of this kit. So Border Models took over and then came out with it under their own name. So this is mostly a Wingnut Wings model inside, with Border completing the instructions and releasing it. So it's a fantastic, wonderful kit. It's about twice the cost, about twice the amount of parts as the HK models. So I'll take you through that. But obviously, Wingnut Wings spares no expense. The detail on this is just exquisite. You can see, just looking at a wing here, the panel line detail, all the individually distorted panels, just absolutely realistic. The rivet detail is raised as it should be. You know, the wings are different as they should be. And yeah, like I say, almost twice the amount of parts included. So the amount of detail is just off the charts. And when you compare it to this HK model that has, you know, recessed rivet detail, and just flat panels, no individual panel distortions, you know, the devil's in the details. And so this Border Models Lanc is going to be just that much better than the HK one. So I'll take you through some video showing the HK model finished and running up, so you know what to expect, and then we'll get into where I'm at with this Border Models. Unfortunately, I'm starting the video kind of halfway through my build, but I have taken photos all the way through, so I can catch you up by narrating over top of the photos of what I've done so far. So that was the HK model in action. So here's the new border model, the way it arrived the day I bought it. Giant kit box, as you can see. And as you open it up, full to the brim of all these beautiful sprues with thousands of parts, all individually bagged carefully. And what a beautiful kit. So here we are coming together, building up the fuselage sides, which are mostly molded, the pilot seat and the dashboard, the steering yoke, all lots of hand painting. Here's the dashboard coming together, beautifully molded. It has decals for the gauges, which I applied with some crystal clear to do the glazing. Just beautiful. Here's the sides again coming together with all of their hand painted detail. Like I say, most of that detail was molded into the side panel, so it's just lots of hand painting. Here's building up the structures inside with the trim wheels and all the electrics and hydraulics in place. The chipping on the floor, the chipping on the table. I'm trying to make a nicely worn aircraft because this would have been in its 12th or 13th mission that I'm modeling. So I'm doing a Mark 1 length, and it's early 43. So these would have been all the early attributes, like the green interiors. Here I am installing some of the wiring now. You can see in the red the wires, which I have yet to paint black or green to mute them, but just showing the routing inside for all the lighting. Here's the rear fuselage sections coming together with all of their hand-painted detail and ribbing, and there'll be more lighting going in back here. Here's the front fuselage sections coming together. So closing that in, I obviously installed a pilot to be operating the controls so that we can have it running up. And etched brass seat belts with the pilot. You can see the engineer's panel behind him there. All the electronics inside, or electrics I should say. Here's the other side here coming together. I know later on most Lancasters were painted black in the interior, but as I'm doing an early Lancaster, this would all be in the green as I've done it, the cockpit green. So here you can see the other side. Beautiful shot of the dash panel in here with the trim wheels and all of that. Fire extinguisher on the left side, and just beautiful, all the detail that this kit comes with. The yellow painted handrails heading down into the bomb aimers area, that was yellow even back in wartime. So here's the front nose section, the bomb aimers area, all the electrics on the sides there. I'm doing it about mid 43, kind of at the peak of ED331's tour or career with 44 Squadron. So it'll be a well-weathered, well-used aircraft, but with all of the early features like this green interior and all the early style radar and details. So it should be really nice. Got the pilot in place with his seat belts. It's all looking really good. You can see the table back there. And of course I've got all my lighting in there and all the wires are run, and you can see there's the radios and that in there. You can see them back in there. Now notice obviously these big holes I've cut in this bulkhead. That is for the wiring from the wings, which I've got going along the inner front channels of the wings. So it'll all feed through this hole and come out of these holes and get all connected. And here's all the electronics that I'm hiding inside of the fuselage above the bomb bay. So obviously I've got to hide all this wiring so you can't see it through all these side windows in the top here. So what I might probably gonna do is build like a little styrene shelf along the bottom of those windows so that everything can be stuffed under that shelf. And I'll just paint the shelf flat black or something to mute it out. But here's, the feed wiring. This will be going to the power source that feeds this whole electronic circuit board. All of the engines in that plug into here. All those plugs are already in, so the engines actually plug into these plugs here once the wires are fed through. Here's the rear fuselage, all detailed with washes and chipping again on the floor. And so the feed wires I'm going to have coming out where the tail wheel is. You can see there's a interior light there. This is another exterior light that sticks out the back of the rear turret there, like a taxiing light, I guess. Here's the other side of the fuselage, which Just got that painted in the green with some washes. You'll never see this, but you know, it's there. Yeah, you know, that door will be opening, but you can really just see kind of that area. Even if you're trying to look, it's really hard to see in there, even with the lighting. But yeah, you know, it's detailed as much as I can, and I've been fitting this this fuselage side time and time again. Every time I add something or change something, I fit it again. Yes, I realize those holes look horribly crude, but they were kind of an afterthought as I'm figuring out the routing of this wiring, but they work well. I've already threaded the wires from the wings through them a few times, so everything fits. I had to enlarge them as I went to make sure all the plugs will fit through them. And of course those holes are totally not visible because on the inside of the cockpit here, you've got a seat and a platform where those holes are, so you can't see anything there. It's totally hidden, so that's fine. We can live with that. So yeah, looking at the nose here, you can see it coming around, and it's like I say, as I showed you in some of those photos, it's well lit. There'll be lighting all throughout, and you can see here's the pilot and the engineer's panel and the dashboard, and all looks really great. And you know, I've got some seams to take care of here once I get the fuselage assembled. This is actually supposed to be a tape seam, I should say, here and here, where the main fuselage sections were joined at the factory. So once I get it all together, I'm probably going to take some decal film or something and do a tape line to cover those seams, because they're actually supposed to be there and done like that. So I've been watching Nigel's modeling bench and his build of this aircraft and learning lots from him, and he's got a great channel there, so I probably reference him a few times in my build of this. But yeah, there you can see that's the electronics in the fuselage thus far, and so it's going to be quite a feat. Obviously all the wiring from the wings, when I put this all together and join the wings, I've got to kind of feed this fuselage section on. You can see I'm just starting the fuselage on, and it'll fit very easily, but I can get everything started, including the wings, and just have it kind of open this far and reach in there with some tweezers to feed all the wires in and plug it all in, and then carefully close it all up together with the wings. So here you can see the wings coming together and all this beautiful panel detail that this kit comes with. All the individually distorted panels as the real thing would be. Here's the wiring in the wings. I had to build these up completely with all the wiring inside for the engines and for here's the wingtip lighting. Little tiny grain of wheat bulb there. And here's the landing gear going in. I had to pre-assemble and paint all this and get it all in there as I built up the wings. So beautiful detail and accuracy. I had to research my colors on this landing gear. There's about 4 colors in there to do it all. You can see the inner wing tanks in that last shot. But yeah, came together really nice. So I'll just show you one. They're both at the same stage right now, but I've got the wings mostly assembled. And you can see here now I've got the flaps installed. So they came out really nicely. Glad I pre-painted that stuff to get all the color and weathering in there before it's all joined together, because otherwise you'd never do it. Landing gear's all finished, as you can see here. It's looking really good. Now, I've been racking my brains trying to figure out a way to best display the engines on this beautiful kit, because the HK model here, I sealed them all in there because to run up the engines, they wouldn't be exposed. So, but this border model's Lancaster, you know, it's got such beautiful detailed engines. I don't want to bury that in there forever. So what I'm going to do, I think, is use a series of tiny magnets to install all of these engine cowlings. So I found some magnets online just through Amazon. show you what they look like. So I've just received in the mail this little stack of 100 magnets. There's 100 of them here, tiny little 1mm by 2mm magnets. And boy, do they ever work well. I'll show you a little example of how strong they are even through a thickness of plastic. So you can see I've just got one on the top here, and then I'm holding the entire stack of them through the other side with just this one. So yeah, they should work great if I have, you know, do all four corners sort of thing of each panel, and have the opposing ones worked into the framework. And yeah, these should work great. So just an update on the wings here. You can see I've started assembling some of the engine bearers with the radiators. I still have yet to paint those, everything that you see there, radiators and the bearers and all that, but coming together. Those holes on the firewall where the wiring is coming through, I'm gonna make little styrene covers to hide them and hide the wires. Of course, the engines and their gearboxes and that are pushed right up against that wall anyway, so it'll be very very difficult to see the wires making the jump across to the engines. Here are the finished wingtip lights with their lenses. Of course, the LED in there, I had to paint them with clear red and clear green, respectively, for port and starboard wings. And then put the lens on and sand the lens out to get a nice, perfect, smooth transition with the wing. So those look great. And once I mask them off and spray the black, they'll really, really look great. So, and you can see the Mr. Surfacer and the gaps on that rear section. Those are 3 little wingtip lights. They're painted red, yellow, and green, apparently. So, and here is the landing lights. Again, I've got a little LED inside there, so those will light up as well. I've painted the inner bowls with a chrome silver, and I have yet to put the clear lenses on top, which will be flush with the wing again. I'll have to mask those off when I go to spray the rest of the black on the underside of these wings. So here you can see the flaps all assembled with weathering, and I've gone over them with some washes to make all the details pop, so those look really nice. Of course, I'll have to mask off this landing gear and the flaps when I spray the black for the rest of the underside. And here's an update of the other wing, and as you can see, I've been very busy. I've put together the dummy engines, because I'm going to have this side closed. So I've got the dummy engines in place, and the electric motors are just sitting there for now. I haven't mounted them yet, but I will be making little motor mounts to get them held in place, and so that they're perfectly aligned. I'm making my own drive shafts. I'll show you with some tubing and styrene rod that fits the tubing perfectly. So that I'll be able to make the drive shafts as long as I want, so that they fit perfectly. Of course, yeah, I'm very impressed with Wingnut Wings' engineering of this kit. All of these cowlings just fit together beautifully. There's no gaps, there's no filling really needed. Of course, I had to pre-paint these with the black because those inner radiators, I pre-painted them in aluminum. I'm probably going to do some washes in that as well to bring that to life a little better. But yeah, there's aluminum painted in there. There's aluminum painted in these shrouds for the exhaust. I pre-painted the exhausts themselves. I'm going to do some more weathering on those, of course, before I close it all in there. But yeah, it's looking really good. Just taking it in stages. Like I say, you got to always consider what needs to be pre-painted before you put the next piece together. And you can see, again, that Mr. Surfacer, how that filled those gaps beautifully, just left a neat little fillet, and we've still got all our rivet detail. Nothing's been lost. Really nice stuff to work with. And here is our finished landing gear, all nicely painted in there. I had to pre-paint all of this before assembling it. You got all the various colors there. Of course, I used titanium silver on the main legs of the landing gear, and there's some chrome silver on the retractable shock sections there, and at the base of the sections there where the wheels are. Of course, there's some gloss black areas on the wheel centers and those parts of the landing gear struts. And of course, the tires are done in rubber black with some weathering and streaking in mud. I think I'm going to be doing some more mud streaking. All the pictures I've seen of these aircraft, you know, they were kept in muddy fields, so I'm going to show some more of that and make them quite muddy on the tires. So I'll do that at a later date. But yeah, got the majority of it pre-painted and looking good in there, so I can mask that off whenever I go to spray the rest of the wings. Of course, here's the flaps again on this wing, all nicely weathered with some washes in there. They came out really nice. And a big bundle of wiring that I have to feed into that fuselage section and do up all the plugs. Yeah, coming along nicely. Oh, I'll show you the other wingtip here with its little light. This one's in green. So that's looking good. Might have to do a little bit of Mr. Surfacer just to clean up the gap there. You can see it in the light. But yeah, that should be easy to fix. And of course, you can see this beautiful wing detail with all the individually distorted panels. Just incredible, especially when it's all painted up and you can see it in the light, all the panel distortions. So you can see I'm now at the stage of assembling the engines, and I pre-painted all of the engine components in the black just so that they're well covered and I can touch in the joints and stuff later with a brush. But the main parts are pre-painted, and of course I'm doing an early Lanc, so it has the Rolls-Royce engines. You get the option of doing Rolls-Royce or Packard built engines. So there's different carburetors and all different components that depending on which style of engine you're doing. Really nice stuff, these wingnut wings. They really spare no expense with the detail and options. So I pre-assembled one because I'm only going to have 2 of the engines exposed. I pre-assembled one to this point just so I can see what I need to do when I go to mount the little motors. These little motors here, which are going to be inside of these engines. So for that motor to be lined up on center with that propeller shaft, it's got to be buried down in there, and I'm gonna have to, you'll see these cylinder sections. There's different ones for Rolls-Royce and Packard. Those cylinders are gonna need to have some material removed along the inner corners to fit around those little motors. And of course, all of it's gonna be well hidden in there. Like you see the cylinders go on like that, and then all this rear gearbox section, which won't impede because the motor's going to be up in the front. But you'll see, yeah, you've got this big, I don't know, it is a pipe of some sort, and then this top section with the wires in it. So that fully covers where the motor's going to be inside, so you won't be able to see any of it. So all these modifications and cutting that I have to do of these cylinder sections should be well covered inside. So it should be no problem to hide those motors, and I'll just have the wires coming out of the back here somewhere. Again, have to pre-drill this stuff as I assemble it so that the wires can come through it. And I'll have to probably pre-install the motor and plug it in after the fact. But that's no problem. There's little plugs on the back of them, so we can do that. Now also with all the wing work I've done, I've got the bomb bay doors built up. So it's just, there's an inner part and the outer part and then some little end caps. So beautiful bomb bays. That's the profile they should be on the inside. So yeah, those came out really nice. So I'm gonna get these painted, pre-painted as well before they ever go onto the fuselage. And I've got all of the cowling pieces coming together here, so I had to put on these little intake pieces on each one, and so they're ready to go. Here's all of the side pieces all cut out and cleaned up. Here's the upper pieces that go on, and you've got just the inboard ones have these little vent scoop sort of things. And interestingly, these scoops are different for port and starboard. So there's the one, I forget whether that's port or starboard, and then here's the other one, slightly different style. Neat little detail there that, you know, when you compare it to the HK kit has little scoops on all 4 engines, and I guess it shouldn't. And they're all the same, you can see up here. So just different sides, but apparently that's not right for these early Lancasters. So, you know, Border or Wingnut Wings has gone the extra mile to get all these details right. Now, on top of the wings, yesterday I also built up these tail planes. Again, beautifully detailed pieces. They just fell together beautifully, perfect fit on everything. I had all of my clamps involved getting all of these components glued up. But yeah, really nice. You can see there's the hydraulic operating arm with its little counterweight on top. And same with these. And yeah, and these guys here, a little lower trim stabilizers, if that's what they are. Again, more of this beautiful panel detail. These are really going to look great when they're all painted and weathered. So yeah, I got both of these built up and ready to go. So I've just got them. Here's all the parts that I'm going to be using in the next few weeks. So I got them all cut and cleaned up and ready to go in there. So I have to balance these on here because of those little stabilizer pieces. We don't want to snap them off. I've painted and installed the tail wheel in this belly section here. So when I do the main fuselage assembly, that'll be ready to go. And of course, there's the early style of flare chute. You have to open up that hole in the bottom. The later style would use that little rectangle there, but we're doing an early Mark I length. So I've got that belly section ready. Here's the tail planes all fully assembled, and they look beautiful. Beautiful panel line detail. You can see I've got some Mr. Surfacer that I've just applied in the inner corners there, and I'm just gonna come back in with some leveling thinners on a cotton bud and clean that up so that it's just a little fillet to fill any gaps. So here you can see I've now cleaned away the excess Mr. Surfacer from those inner corners there. Just came in with a cotton bud soaked in Mr. Color leveling thinners and just wiped it away. I was using a Mr. Surfacer 500, which is the thickest of the Mr. Surfacers, and yeah, it just left like a neat little fillet in that inside corner to fill the gap, which is just what I wanted. So did top and bottom, nice and neat. Exactly, like it's such a nice material to work with. It does a great job filling those little gaps. So yeah, that's how you use it. So here we are here. Here's the fuselage. I've shown you this already before, but so I've just been test fitting and refitting. It's just sitting here now. There's no glue, but I've just slid on the other side of the fuselage just to make sure it's going to fit okay. And it does. It fits beautifully, you know, with some clamps. Of course, you've got these upper sections that are removable. I won't lift the whole thing off there, but you got a front and a rear one. And, you know, I've been following Nigel's modeling bench for this entire build, and it's been very helpful. He's got a great channel there. Really love it. But he had a lot of problems with the fit of all of this. You know, he had steps going on where these upper parts join, and you had to do a lot of sanding and filling, and, you know, I think he had to spread out the side a little bit with some pieces of styrene inside just to get rid of the step. But mine has none of that. It's a beautiful fit. So, you know, I'm one of the lucky ones, I guess. There must be some amount of fluctuation with, you know, hot, cold, whatever, when these come out of the molds, that some fit better than others, I guess. I don't know. I'm not a manufacturer, but yeah, mine certainly fits absolutely perfectly. Like, there is no step there at all. It's going to be really nice. I'm just gently holding that in place, but you can see, and it's like that on both sides. There's nothing. So very happy with how that's going to go. And like I say, I've fit this together probably a dozen times now. I just keep checking and rechecking every time I add anything else. And same thing with the wings. I've fit those a number of times. And yeah, well, like you can see, I had to modify that wing spar to clear some of the wiring inside that I've got routed inside these wings, because there's such a mass of wiring that has to come out of the front of each one of these wings and get routed and plugged in when I do this join. Oh, that's going to be quite a day when I do this big join. But like I said, what I'm planning to do is to finish these wings completely and get them all, you know, engines installed and detailed, and get these wings fully painted and detailed with all the roundels and lettering, and then I will join them to the fuselage. But that's my current plan, is to do as much painting, pre-painting before the assembly as I can. Hopefully that all works out in my favor and we get it looking seamless and beautiful. Yeah, so I will keep you posted on the next steps. So here we are with the painted propellers, all the insides and outsides ready to go together. And here we are with the propellers all finished painted. So as you can see, I masked off the yellow on the ends, or sprayed the yellow first and then masked it off, and then sprayed all the black and painted all the insides like in that last shot. And yeah, so all done. So while I'm focused on the aircraft here, I'm going to tell you a little bit of backstory for the aircraft that I've modeled here, and what I'm going to be modeling it again, I believe, with my border models Lancaster. So a bit of family history here. We had a relative, Reginald Clifford Harding. We knew him as Reg Harding. Here he is getting his wings. He enlisted in May of 41 and earned his wings by early 42. He's from Kirkland Lake, Ontario. He's standing in front of the local drugstore there. And there he is with his very proud parents, having earned his wings as a pilot. And so they shipped them over to the UK in 42, where he started with 25 Group flying Wellingtons. And of course he formed his crew at that time, and that was his crew of 7 friends that they all met and formed their bonds together. You know, navigator, wireless operator, bomb aimer, and eventually gunners as well. And then from 25 Group on the Wellingtons, they were eventually transferred to 44 Rhodesia Squadron to fly on Lancasters. And for those who don't know, 44 Rhodesia Squadron was the first squadron to be equipped with Lancasters. They started with Manchesters, actually, and then evolved into Lancasters when the Lancaster debuted. So they would have had the earliest first ones. Here he is with his crew. Of course, they all became best friends over there. They're with each other every day. He actually became really close with his navigator, Les Pendergast. You can see there's Les on the left there, playing games with Bill Quantz, I believe, who is the wireless operator, if I got that correct. There's Les and Reg again on leave in Manchester. You can see the stern look on Reg's face. They've seen some action. And this is another crew that they shared operations with on the same aircraft, ED-331. which is the aircraft that we've modeled here, that I'm probably going to be doing again. You can see in some of these shots, you can see the tally on the side of the fuselage of the missions that they've done in this aircraft. So I've tried to recreate that accurately. It doesn't seem to be any other nose art other than the tally, but you can see lots of little details of early Mark I Lancasters there, with the early style radar equipment and the pitot tube, and it's got the spark arresters over the exhausts, the pointed propeller blades, lots of little details you can point out if you know what you're looking for. The 44 squadrons were KM, and then whatever the letter was. So KMZ was Reg's aircraft. I was able to go online to the National Archives and was able to find all of the squadron records for 44 Squadron. As you can see, there's the crest there, 44 Rhodesia Squadron. And basically, I was able to see all of the operations that 44 Squadron did throughout the war with Lancasters, and I was able to find, you know, all of the operations that this aircraft, ED-331, did and with who. And what I learned, you know, I had always thought that a crew was assigned an aircraft and that was their aircraft to use for the duration. And what I learned going through all these records is that these crews all bounced around through lots of different aircraft. There might be 4 or 5 different lengths that they would use fairly regularly. There would be some that they use more than others, but you know, they weren't necessarily assigned one length that they just used, which was news to me. So I was able to go through the records from the time Reg's crew, well, and before, because I wanted to see the history of this aircraft for the sake of modeling it. I wanted to know what happened to it, you know, because things like weathering and battle damage come into play when you're building a scale model. So the history was what I was looking for, but also my family's, Reg's crew and history there with the squadron. So it was very telling. I was able to look up, first of all, I wrote it all down here. I'll show you, take you through this basic timeline that I've written down based on these records that used to be secret, but are now declassified and available online. But basically, you can see starting in December 6th, 42, that's when we first see ED-331, call sign Z, being used in the squadron. And it was initially used by an air crew headed by pilot Sanderson. And you can see in my photos here, that lower photo there is a picture of Sanderson and his crew. And you can notice also the boxes in the bottom, those are homing pigeons that were being used by bomber crews quite extensively. If they were ever to ditch the aircraft or whatever, had to send emergency call back to base that's below 10,000 feet or 5,000 feet, I should say, they would use these emergency homing pigeons to send a distress call, which is very interesting, carryover from the First World War. Anyway, Sanderson and his crew, I'll just refer to them as the Sanderson crew, they used this aircraft fairly extensively in December of 42, although not exclusively, and there are other aircraft that they flew outside of ED-331 in these time periods. I'm just focused on ED-331 specifically. So you can see there's another crew headed by pilot Walker and whatever his crew were. I'm not going to list off all the names, but you can see I've written down any notes that they had written. So on this first one, the bomb site was damaged on landing, so that had to be repaired. On the 20th here, when Walker's crew flew it, they had to abort the mission because guns for mid, upper, and rear were not functioning, and there was an electrical issue as well. And then there was this, Hardin was the pilot of this other crew. So multiple crews using the same aircraft. And you see here we got into January. more operations with Sanderson's crew. This was another aborted flight because radio failure. Here on the 17th, Sanderson's crew ran into heavy flak. There were several holes in the wing, tail, and fuselage, as well as oil leaking from the starboard inner engine. So that's some battle damage that would have obviously needed repairs that can be shown in my model of the aircraft. So you can see February 43, no operations whatsoever from ED 331 because presumably it was being repaired from all of this. And then we get into March of 43, again, Sanderson's crew flying it. Nettleton, which is a familiar name, Nettleton was the group captain. He was the wing leader of 44 Squadron at that time. And you'll see his signature at the bottom of all of these records from 44 Squadron. He signed off on the bottom of every page for every crew's reports from every ops. So he was the squadron leader, like I say. But he occasionally used this aircraft as well. So on the 7th of March, NCOs were posted. This is where my relative, Reg Harding, and his crew joined up with 44 Squadron. I guess they had been serving with another squadron previous, flying smaller aircraft like Wellingtons and whatnot. So they upgraded to Lancasters and were transferred to 44 Squadron at this time. So here we are, Reg and his crew, the Harding crew, we're calling them. They took out this W4106 Lancaster. I forgot to write down the call letter for it. And then they're kind of jumping around from aircraft to aircraft. ED 433, call number V, had some flak damage. And here we are, their first flight on ED 331 was on the 29th of March. Again, flak damage, icing issues, bomb doors stuck. So I read their review of the flight, and yeah, they ran into some heavy flak, took on some damage. The icing issues prevented him from getting above 10,000 feet as they were crossing, and they thought that they were going to have to jettison their bombs and turn home because the height for the raid was like at least 15,000 feet, and they couldn't even get that high because of the icing. But as soon as they crossed the coast, the icing, I guess, melted, and they were able to get the aircraft up to 15,000 feet and do their bomb run. Upon dropping their bombs, the bomb doors stuck open and remained open until nearly all the way home, and then they eventually closed on their own. Interesting notes that you get to see in these archived flight reviews. So here we are, April 43. Again, the Harding crew, they're kind of jumping around from different aircraft. Call number P, call number V. Back on ED 331 here on the 9th. On the 10th, that Sanderson crew that had been so active on that aircraft that we see in the photo, they are posted to elsewhere out of the squadron. So we stopped seeing them in operations reviews. So on the 18th, you can see they're all over the place trying different Lancasters, but I did count them all up, and certainly ED 331 is the one that they did have the most time on. They had about 6 missions on it, where there's only 2 missions on that one and 1 mission on these ones. And you can see here on the 28th, most of these missions were all bombing missions. But here on the 28th, it was a gardening mission, and they took on some heavy flak damage, including perspex blown out above the pilot. And I know from Reg's personal records, he took some perspex in the leg on that operation, and it ended up having him out for about 6 weeks or so, healing from that injury with his leg. And the rest of his crew members, Pendergast and the other guys, they were reassigned with other crews while Reg was on leave there. So all of May, there's no sign of the Harding crew, but ED-331 is being used extensively by other pilots. Haywood's crew, Nettleton and his crew, Sharp and their crew, they report being coned 3 times in that mission and having to dive and take evasive maneuvers multiple times. The Haywood and his crew took on flak damage. So as you can see, lots of flak damage to this aircraft throughout its life, which I think I'm going to show some, repairs and whatnot in my model. I think it would be a good thing to show, and interesting. It just goes with the story of the aircraft. Here we are, June of 43. Again, lots of different crews, the Sharp crew, Burr and his crew, Aldridge and his crew. This one on the 17th, Burr and his crew, the port outer engine caught fire over the bomb site, and they had to dive to try and put the fire out, and were able to make it back home, obviously. But that's a pretty major thing to have happen on a raid. Evasive maneuvers by Aldridge reported. This Shorthouse and his crew, they speak of using Boozer, which and saying the Boozer is working well. I had to look that up, but Boozer was a method of radar for radar kind of thing. They could tell if their aircraft was being picked up on enemy radar, and if it was being followed by enemy radar. They'd get this warning thing through the Boozer, they called it, which is kind of interesting. So here we are on the 25th of June. The Harding crew is back at it again after being on leave from that injury. They're flying this aircraft, W4961, call sign S on that mission, and then back to ED-331 the next night. And then here we are into finishing June again on another aircraft the following night again, call sign X. So then getting into July, again, ED-331, Boozer very active that night, so they were getting picked up on a lot of radars, and it's like having a radar lock to having to take evasive maneuvers. So this is an interesting one. The 9th of July, Nettleton's crew took the aircraft out and had to abort while crossing the channel. Strong, acrid burning smell filled the cabin, and they came home, all of them, with strong headaches and nausea reported. So, obviously it was repaired immediately, because the next night on the 10th, my relative Reg Harding and his crew took the same aircraft out again, and they reported a flak hole in the port wing that they took on. And then a few nights later, on the 13th, Nettleton's crew again took the aircraft out on a mission over Turin, and were lost. The aircraft is missing in action. So this is the demise of ED-331. And it went down with Nettleton and his crew, who was the wing commander that all of these guys reported to. And on the same night, on the 13th, Reg and his crew were part of the same raid over Turin, and they're flying this call sign W. And Reg and his crew reported lightning storm that was over the target, and icing issues, presumably from the storm as well. So at this time, this is where we lose ED-331, and it is replaced by this new aircraft, DV-202, also call sign Z, because it's the replacement for this old one that was call sign Z. So DV-202 is the aircraft that Reg and his crew were eventually lost in August. So you can see all of these different crews who are using it through the last part of July here. The Snell and his crew, Pilgrim and his crew, Snell again, and then Harding's crew start flying it on August 10th, and using window. You know, they would describe it, you know, 50 bundles dropped, 100 bundles dropped, whatever it was. Window were little foil strips that they would throw out to throw off enemy radar. So that boozer thing would tell them that they're being picked up, and then they would start dumping this window to try and fool the enemy radar. And so here you can see all these missions that DV202 is going on throughout the month of August. All these different crews flying it. And then on the 18th of August, this is when my relative Reg Harding and his crew were shot down over a raid over Peenemünde. As the story goes, they were presumably shot down by a Bf-110. This is comparing German records at the same time and what they claim they shot down. This is a Bf-110 that had this new weapon called Steger fire, or Steger music it's called, and which is a cannon that fires directly up, and so they could fly under a Lancaster and just shoot directly up at it, and that is presumably how DV202 was taken down over Peenemünde. And you know, I went and saw what is left of DV202, which is crashed in a shallow swampy lake in Peenemünde and still exists there today. You can see one of the engines in the top left there was recovered and is hanging in the local museum there. And of course, that's where they got serial numbers and were able to verify it as DV202, which was my relative's Lancaster. Obviously a tragic story for everyone involved, on both sides, and including the families involved. You know, obviously war is a terrible thing for everyone. But that is one of the many reasons that we build these models, so their memories are not forgotten, their names are not forgotten, and the sacrifice that they went through. So in the end, I am going to be building a ED331, which is what I've done here with the HK model. But yeah, this border model is just going to be that much more detailed and accurate. And like I say, I can tell and show more of its accurate history this time because I've gleaned all this information from the National Archives that better paint a more accurate story of what they all went through over there and what that aircraft went through over there, you know, with all of the crews that flew it. So very excited to have put the story together in a more detailed manner and learned all of that. So it'll make the process of building this model that much more interesting. So moving along from that, I think I'm gonna end this video here, and we'll pick up with another video showing you the progress as I carry on with mounting all the motors and engines and getting this all squared away and painted and sealed up. And I'll be finishing the wings, like I say, getting them all painted. I should add that I purchased a few really great resources. This book in particular, the Wing Leader Photo Archive of early production Lancasters. They also have one for later production and specials. So they're just fantastic, and luckily this book actually has a ton of photos of Lancasters from 44 Squadron with the KM lettering code. As you can see on the front, there's one of the earliest ones. They started off with the gray lettering like that in 42. But yeah, just a wonderful resource. There's another 44 Lancaster there, KMO. Yeah, there's great pics, lots of details. Gotta have it for building this model. Another older book that I've had for many years is the Avro Lancaster Comprehensive Guide for the Modeler, and it, again, really great resource. You can look up all of the batch builds of Lancasters and see, you know, how many were with each batch. So you can look up a Lancaster serial number like ED331 and see exactly where it was built, what its specs were, what engines it had, where it was delivered. Pretty interesting stuff. All the power plant information. this is older publication, but it's got, you know, all of the interior shots showing all the various components, how to model them, how these things changed. This is all the evolution of variants, drawings of it all. I'm flipping through it really quickly here, but really like different color schemes. Really great. And like I say, it covers the Manchester and the Lincoln, the Manchester being the predecessor to the Lancaster. So and how to model them, and all of it even covers in the back of it is all the aftermarket details that were available at the publication date. I think this book came out in like 2002 or something like that. It's an older publication, but lots of great information in there. And then of course, for doing the paint job on my aircraft, rather than using decals, because I am going to be doing, you know, the KMZ like I did here, which was, I used decals for this aircraft. I was able to find an alphabet set and use that. But for this Border Models Lancaster with all this incredible panel line detail, I don't want to risk losing any of that with decals. So I've decided to use the One-Man Army paint masks, which do all of the roundels and lettering, and it's all masking stencils for doing all of that, so it can all be painted on lettering. And it has all the tiny little hood release and all this kind of stuff. Little tiny, you can see in millimeters how tiny these stencils are. You just stick them on the model and spray the black or whatever color it is through there, and it ends up with all painted lettering. So I've seen this used online on a number of YouTube channels, and they just look fabulous. So great thing to have for this model. It's going to really help the paint job come to life. So we'll end the video there. Lots to look forward to in future videos, so I'll keep you posted. Until then, I'm Jeff Chrysler, a detail enthusiast. We'll see you again.